this case study presentation of a Net Zero District 3 police headquarters in Cincinnati. My name is Sean Hesse. I'm an architect with Immersion Design, heading up the Boston office of our firm, and with me is Chad Edwards, who's a principal of the firm, headquartered in Cincinnati. So we're going to jump right in here. The way that, you know, this big question across the front of the screen here is, can a 24/7 technology-rich, publicly funded building that also happens to be in coal country actually achieve net zero energy? So, you know, this is why everybody's here, right? I mean, the idea that a project will be able to achieve net zero. We just wrapped up construction on this project, so starting now to essentially start to gather the data to prove net zero. But you know, the whole story of the project really starts with kind of a traditional model from the city of Cincinnati. So they had, you know, their own cost metrics, their own program metrics, their own quality expectations. This was a design build project, so they were seeking a fixed price for this project. So design teams paired up with contractors, and this was a competitively bid project. And so as part of this RFP, you know, this project is located near the head of a start of a bike network. It's at the very top of a watershed that's seen a lot of degradation over a series of years that the city's working on recovering or repairing. There's a lot of interest in terms of how this project interacted with larger urban planning schemes. So this is at the start of an intended business district, high density business district. They wanted to incorporate a lot of public art, and you know, the last time that they built a new police station was about 40 years ago. So they wanted to really transform the paradigm of what a police station or what a police headquarters really is and what it means to the community. And so, you know, the RFP kind of asked for all of these things and said, oh, and LEED Silver, that'd be great. And so from our perspective, we responded to that and asked ourselves, well, what is it that we can actually do that is going to make a difference to this project? And, you know, besides being the cheap team.
But was it really someone who wanted platinum on the owner side? Or was it just, I heard about that, that'd be nice?
No. The city of Cincinnati has a pretty robust sustainability program. So LEED Silver is a minimum for all city construction. The Office of Quality is really active, and the director of the Office of Environmental Quality is a prominent voice within the city, and there's a lot of programs that are happening. It's just that the RFP wasn't ambitious.
It had some metrics that were above code, but LEED Silver was the charge. So this was the first major design build for the city, design build pursuit. So we knew going in, we had to partner with a contractor. We have a really great relationship with Messer Construction, and we knew that we had to meet the requirements and come in as low bid to win the job. But what else could we do to kind of, you know, stand out aside from being cheap?
So that was our approach was, you know, be bold, right? So the approach that we put together that we presented to the city was essentially a base bid that met the charge of LEED Silver and accomplished all of these other objectives, with options that would take it to LEED Gold and an option that would take it to LEED Platinum with a net zero. And so all of these, all of the responses that we created allowed the city to see it as an option, and that was really all it was. And they had to choose to implement it, which they did.
That's a question.
Yeah.
So
why did you decide this project was the one to present those options? Or do you present those options anytime you see Lead Silver? In our opinion, we see police headquarters and stations coming up on our emails all the time, and all the public work. And in Boston, I think it's Article 37.
Yeah.
Needs to be LEED
Lead
certifiable.
Yeah.
So, it's every building we could potentially do those options. What was it about this that
Well, we
go for it?
I mean, no, you're right. I mean, that's essentially we always push for, we always throw something out there, right? Like, okay, well, yeah, we know that you're interested in LEED. Well, let's, have you heard about Livability Challenge? Let's talk about Livability. Okay, well, we do a little bit of study on that. Can that work? Or net zero? Or and we're always trying to push people to see what else they could be doing. I think this one in particular was well suited because, I mean, to Gray's point earlier, the city actually is writing a lot of momentum around sustainability at the moment. So within the city, within the administration, sustainability was really coming to the fore as something that was important to the city. And so giving them an opportunity to do something that was taking a real leadership position and really pushing the boundary of what everybody thinks you can do.
So the structure is there and they're receptive and they have certain efforts that they're trying to do. Now usually that's not because they really want it. It's that there's some entity that's like a vanguard pushing them to get somewhere. Who's really driving this?
I would say that the vanguard is within the walls of the city.
Yeah.
So Larry Falcon is the Director of Environment and Sustainability. One of the unique things about this design build pursuit is that they had a set of requirements, which we'll get to a little bit more here in a second. But then, then they asked for qualifications of design build teams. So I think there's 25 or so teams submitted for it. They narrowed it down to 3. And so obviously we were one of the 3. Those 3 were given additional criteria and said you have a month or so to do a design and price it. And the unique part of this was that they said you can talk to anybody. We're not going to have formal meetings or anything, but if you want to, whoever you want to talk to within the city, feel free to talk to. So we did. And we talked to Larry Falcon and said, hey, here's what we're thinking in terms of sustainability. You think it will fly? He goes, hey, I'll back that. We talked to the police department. We talked to public recreation. We talked to just anybody that we could get our hands on that would agree to give us some more time.
Before you put your proposal
Before, as we were designing, we were talking to people and getting, because when you're designing if it's a design bid build, you get to talk with the client, right? It's very difficult for us to design a building where you don't get to talk to the client, the owner and the end user. And so when they opened that up, that was kind of a relief for us. So we could start asking these really important questions. And so our final submission was unlike the others because of those conversations. Not just in terms of sustainability, but in terms of building massing and the look of the building and things like that. So,
We're talking to people in the police department.
we were.
Yeah, the detectives that moved to this location.
So they had one officer that was sort of leading the effort on the police side, and then they also had a captain. The captain's time was pretty limited. That's why they dedicated this one particular officer. So we were able to meet with her several times to be the liaison during the design side, during the competition side. But afterwards, we had access to basically whomever we needed to. So we even had design energy charrettes with 4 or 5 police officers at the table. It was great. But we're really getting ahead of the
Well, we can skip a lot of these slides.
But the other part is that the city did a great job at pulling in the community.
Yeah.
So before we were shortlisted, they went through a lot of site stuff And then as we were shortlisted, they had these community engagement sessions, which
When they, you know, they did a similar process to a lot of the work that happens here in Boston, where there's kind of a preliminary study that gets produced underneath one contract, and then the project, once it's more defined, gets essentially advertised again. So so they did a programming exercise, site selection exercise, and kind of early layout in terms of programming adjacencies, those kinds of things with another team. So this is actually the RFP that was put together by another team, right? And kind of established, here's the site, here's the general layout of what we think where the program should go. And you can see, you can see that there's a sea of parking behind this thing. There's actually a big box store right there. So this is a commercial strip that right now is just really deteriorated. And as part of their overall urban planning scheme, this is all going away, right? This is all being phased out. So this is the first project to set the tone of what the street is going to be like, to have a street presence, to have public space along the street, get rid of these giant seas of asphalt, those kinds of things.
What's north-south is west?
Yeah, north-south.
So to the south, there's an existing neighborhood business district that is pretty active, but then there's this zone in between that NBD and our project. And so we're trying to create an anchor at the north end, and then the rest will start to be able to be infilled in between.
Yeah, I asked a question, jumping way ahead. Are you at all concerned if solar panels as development comes in that you're going to be blocked by tall buildings?
Great question. Immediately to the south, and you can kind of see how the arrow kind of curves around. There's a substation right there. So that's never going to go away, And then just to the south of that is a
School.
It's a high school, and so that's pretty well established. And it's far enough away that the sun angles aren't going to be an issue. It's a fairly substantial building, but at the same time we've got. And in the parking lot, of course, also gives us that separation.
Right, there's parking here to the south.
To the south, on the side.
There's public parking to the south. So we've kind of talked through this, in terms of our approach. We really, in our response, we created essentially our base bid, which responded to all of the criteria of the RFP, and then we put together these betterments. And one of the things that I was really excited about with betterments, which actually didn't end up playing out, was the idea of using PACE financing to try to create a scheme that actually would allow the higher performing betterments to actually be a smaller upfront dollar value for the city, right? Because you could lump a bunch of energy efficiency improvements into the PACE financing and finance that over 30 years, whatever it is. And so your upfront cash now bill would actually be smaller to achieve a net zero project. A net zero LEED Platinum project would cost less than our base bid, which didn't quite work out that way.
We got into how the city can access the PACE financing.
Right.
And so,
PACE is based on property value and property tax, and since it's a public entity, it was. But we had a lot of fun. Like, we were getting kind of giddy about, oh man, this could be awesome.
Yeah, that was our
That was the proposal.
Is that our base bid can be lower if you access PACE financing and you can on top of it.
Well, but it's whatever the financing is. The idea is structuring the higher margin improvements with mixing that with the lower margin improvements to stretch it all out.
Yes. So as soon as you put your PV panels in the same bucket as all of the insulation and the windows, and right, it's like.
Whereas ASCO, the PPAs are just trying to scoop up all of
Just the
solar,
right,
whatever the rest.
right. So it's another way to make it more holistic too.
So PACE had relatively just come online at that time. And so I think that was another thing that Larry Feldman was really interested in pursuing.
Yeah.
Was trying to capture that. Now, when it got over to legal, it just, it didn't really work out, but
Right. So this was, again, kind of the minimum requirements on the left, right? Looking at all the urban planning impacts, the dealing with Cincinnati Recreation Commission. It's right at the top of a park next to a school, near a park, near a bike path. This Lick Run master plan is the watershed project where we worked on helping to clean up combined sewer overflows at the bottom of the watershed, and now we're working at the top of the watershed. So we tried to connect those concepts. We had crime prevention through design. And then looking at, we proposed these betterments with the understanding that, this is a 50-year building, at least, right? I mean, this is a project that they're going to keep forever. So in terms of metrics, one of the things that, starting out, I mean, I'm just assuming at this point, the term EUI is becoming pretty well known within the industry. And so we start out by we track the EUI of our projects. We rank it with a lot of other benchmarks that are out there. CBEX, the 2030 Challenge. There's a database by the Department of Energy that has a series of net zero energy projects where you can see what the design EUI for those projects are. So this is a chart that kind of summarizes all of those, and is part of what we use to help set targets at the very beginning of a project, which we did with this one. So the gray bars, the dark gray bars represent projects that Emergent Design has done. The light gray bars are those national averages from CBEX. The orange bars represent the 2030 Challenge targets by year.
I love that CBEX has vacant.
Yes. I actually love that there are a lot of buildings that are occupied that are below the vacant energy use. And then you can see the green bars are the buildings from the Department of Energy, the Net Zero Energy buildings database. So there's two outliers on this chart, and they're both our projects. One is on the far left, and the other is the far right. So the far left one is the project that has an EUI of 446, and this is the Advanced Power and Thermal Research Lab, where they recreate lightning inside the building.
Let me just make sure it's watts per square foot.
Kilowatt hours per square foot per year. Oh, right. KBTU per
square foot.
Yeah.
I
So
think you missed the explanation of why this is at 446.
No, it's lightning.
it recreates lightning inside the labs, right? So then the other end of the spectrum is this project that we advised on, the Roche Health Clinic, which is in Tanzania, which is completely isolated in the middle of Tanzania with no electrical service at all. So we take those two out. We've got a series of projects kind of scattered through this middle zone.
They're not burning any gas or anything, are they?
So that Roche Clinic it's like a garage.
It's a shelter.
Correct. There's no power. I mean, it's really near the equator, so everybody's used to that. They have 2 seasons, wet and dry, and the doctors that volunteer for the clinic, they have battery-powered equipment that they power in the city and they come out. So the building itself has no energy at all, not even solar panels.
That counts.
Right.
Well, so just for a second, I mean, where does just passive fit into energy use intensity? I mean, don't you calculate it like
It's KBTU.
Energy used.
What you're using, the energy that you're
Energy consumed
from offset, like from
from any source.
Right. So if it's wired to the grid, you're still using the power. If it's wired to solar panels, you're still using the power.
Got it.
But you're not using any power.
Okay. So indeed, anything passive, anything solar light is not calculated in the EUI.
What it does is it lowers the EUI.
It lowers the EUI.
lowers the need to compensate.
From your mechanical.
Right. So if you have, and we did this out in New Mexico, building self-sustaining buildings out on the Mesa. They did have solar panels for lights and that kind of stuff. But the general heating and cooling was primarily passive. And so that energy consumption, that EUI of that building is super low.
I'm having a hard time getting my head around, like, you're still consuming energy that comes from the sun, it's just, it's free. Or like,
Right,
where
but
does
there's
that?
no, but there's no KBTU consumption, right? So, yes,
Don't
it's
you calculate,
You're not-
So I think those are separate, right? Your generation can be held separate. You can almost ignore it at first if you calculate your site EUI. You know, however much energy you use, regardless of where it comes from, that's going to be what is using your EUI. And then you can say, essentially, now that you've brought that number, your consumption down as low as possible, you can try and meet that demand through renewables.
So EUI is just the measure of essentially electricity and gas energy that's used.
Got it.
Although,
so the more passive techniques you use, the lower that's going to be. So, in a sense, that's the
That's where
ideal.
it's captured.
That's the ideal.
Right.
Is using the sun as passive, not necessarily using the sun as active with PVs. Right? Passive obviously is a better strategy.
the only thing I would argue with your zero EUI, I could say, okay, site EUI, I'll give you 0. If you wanted to talk about source EUI, you know, where your power is coming from,
For the battery packs?
you might want to include those battery packs. I mean, it's energy, it's being
Yeah.
used somewhere, and
Right.
it's being brought into the building, but.
Fair enough.
This is all site EUI, so.
Yeah. Totally on board.
Thank you for that diversion.
It's helpful.
So just a couple of other projects to benchmark against as we go through. So this was Proctor Hall for the University of Cincinnati. We renovated the envelope. We actually didn't even touch the mechanical systems and brought them down by about 15% in terms of energy use. This is, that's right. And then we've got the renovation for the Art Museum at 29. This was a brand new building that was built for the Red Cross at 27. And then this is a project that a colleague of ours, we actually, this project was built before our involvement, and we got involved when he decided that he wanted to take his existing legal building and make it net zero. And so we came in to help him do some envelope modifications.
So what's really cool about this is that it's a net zero energy renovation, office and manufacturing, and it's at 16.7. And you pointed out that they had vacant. The average vacant building was at 20.9.
Yeah.
So they're
manufacturing.
yeah. What's that?
How do you get that low in the UI?
He distributes a lot of sweaters to staff. Literally.
Personal thermal
He does.
devices.
You talk about occupant engagement.
Yeah. It's their culture.
This is the culture of this company. I mean, from the top down, it's part of hiring. It's part of it is baked into this company. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, legitimately, he was there in the wintertime, and he looked around, and everybody's wearing polos. Right. Like it's February. It's cold. Why is everybody wearing polos? Right. You know, and then in the summertime, people are coming in, and we got long sleeves, thicker shirts on. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So it's time to say, okay, well, obviously we're wasting energy because you should be wearing short sleeve shirts in the wintertime.
Yeah.
That's great. But
yeah.
he was a client that allowed us to scrutinize everything. We looked at plug loads. We did. They have a thermal imagery gun, so we could shoot the building and we could see where we really needed to attack. He allowed us to mess with zoning and even things like putting a vestibule in and stuff that, as we're walking through, we're just making mental checklists of everything. Created this report that helped them get to 16.7. So that's pretty cool when the average vacant building's at 20.9. Water source heat pumps.
Yeah, and he's got there's
Geo Exchange.
and this is a solar thermal system, which I think is coupled to his heating system. It's not just doing domestic.
Right. Yeah. So He has 4 different types of PV panels. Part of his business is to basically be a broker for solar. So he's got 4 different that he's tested. He has a wind turbine that you can see there. He found a manufacturer in Switzerland that has a wind turbine that operates at 5-mile-per-hour winds. He openly admits that there's not as much ROI there as solar, but it's a nice billboard for him. People recognize where he is because of that. And again, it's just one of those clients that that is really engaged and really interested in this kind of stuff.
So with all that, is net zero?
It is necessary, yeah.
It's got battery storage too. It's got an entire array of batteries up in the loft.
Yeah. So he's tested the longevity and the efficiency of those. And he also has a electric only vehicle, and he's got a solar charging station. So even when he's driving on sun power.
Right.
Which is actually what his license plate says. Sun power.
All right. So in terms of trying to establish what a realistic target is for this police headquarters. So this arrow represents the kind of national average for police headquarters. This is the project that we use kind of as the minimum benchmark in terms of, if we're going to talk about net zero, this is kind of the minimum. So this is the DOE NREL Golden, Colorado facility. So this is 220,000 square feet of office and lab, and there's some differences in terms of using this as a benchmark, but this is really kind of essentially the 35 is what we said is like, okay, if we're talking about EUI, or if we're talking about net zero or ultra low energy, this is where we're shooting. So you can see some of the differences here, right? This is 220,000 square feet compared to 40. So in terms of scale, it's a little bit different. There weren't as many security issues with this facility, so we didn't have bullet resistant glazing in there or whatever. Timing wise, this is 5 years ago, so looking at escalation, they do not operate 24/7, 365 days. And one of the big pushes within the District 3 project was that there typically, when you start to look at plug loads, it's a really easy switch to go from desktops to laptops, right? Because they use much less energy. And in this project, there was a blanket, no laptops, right? Everybody's on desktops. So we had that to overcome as well, whereas the DOE NREL project has everybody on laptops.
The sort of mandate was the police operate a certain way, were not to affect how they function, because I don't think anybody would want to jeopardize the way that they function.
So I've actually read about this building a bunch, and something that surprised me on the case study and that stuff was that you talk about a UI and the plug loads and associated things that are like things that you think HVAC, you think they're big pieces, but they have so many desks there that their voice over IP phones that they have like a 15-watt phone as the standard, and they're able to get like a 5-watt or 3-watt.
Wow.
And the difference in changing the phone over, which you think, it's like a couple watts, what's the big deal, right? It was the equivalent of like an extra like $200,000 of like $200,000 of solar that would have to be installed. So, instead of just putting the solar on to accommodate the load, you get so intense to dive deep into the load and think about, okay, there's 220,000 square feet of offices here, hundreds of people, maybe these 5-watt differences matter.
Yeah.
It totally does.
It's amazing. Yeah.
We the police wanted each individual locker to have a fan within it, because they wear bulletproof vests, gets kind of sweaty, they put it in the locker, and it reeks. So they want individual fans. And so we looked at it, and similar thing. Each little fan wasn't much, but when you add them all together, it's like, oh my gosh, we blew it.
Right.
And so we were able to work through a system where there are vents down low, vents up high, and we just pull a little bit extra than we normally would out of the
whole room.
Out of the whole room. So that pulls out, instead of having individual fans. It's the same thing. It's looking at every little device. How can we squeeze? How can we think about things differently? we looked at their radios, and we tested those, and we said, okay, we're charging them at the station, so that's a plug load. Are there other radios we can find that would do the same job but be less? And we could find the one that would perform like this one. And so we kept it. We figured it another way. But the fans were able to find another way.
So in terms of challenges and differences, this is the other big one is solar exposure. So the blue star is our police headquarters, and the blue outline star is the Golden, Colorado facility, right? So pretty significant difference in terms of available solar energy as well.
If you look at Cincinnati, it's very comparable to.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as.
What's the gradient there? Annual.
This is
Kilowatt hours.
Yeah. This is essentially kilowatt hours per square meter per day. If you have a solar panel that's tilted to be at the correct, angle for your latitude. So that's where it gets back to this, right? Where the conversation that we just had is that's why it's so important, right? We have all of these challenges. We've got less available solar resources, and so this idea that in order to really make this affordable, you've got to really do as much conservation and passive stuff as possible up front. Once you get that done, then you can start to look at, okay, well, let's put in the most efficient fans, the most efficient lights, the most efficient phones, right? And then once we've, exhausted that, then we start to talk about, okay, now let's size the solar. Now let's figure out what we actually need to offset. So Gray, back to your initial conversation, these first two tiers of the pyramid are about getting that EUI as low as possible, right? And the energy use intensity, the amount of energy that you use, the demand, get that as low as possible so that triangle at the top can be as small as possible as well, which translates into $700,000 difference, right, in your solar panels. So EUI of essentially code compliant police station, typical police station, to what we were designing.
What was the on the right side? That's the cost
of the PV.
Okay, got it. So it's a
If
supply.
you were to match an ADUI,
Right.
It would be 1.3, and what we were able to achieve is 600. So in terms of our process, we need to switch here. So we do operate integratively, and again, it was a little bit difficult because we didn't have direct access to the client at all times like we normally do. We had a month to work through this. We did have some access to the end user and to the client, but that time was somewhat limited. And so behind the scenes, we knew that there was a lot at stake for the city for this project. There were going to be a lot of eyes and ears on this thing, so it really needed to hit a home run. So part of what we did during the design process was start looking at how we were designing and doing design energy models, not the engineering energy models on the back end, but looking at massing, looking at orientation, window to wall ratio, that sort of thing to lower that consumption. Obviously we had to hit the RFP goals. And as Sean mentioned, we wanted to kind of bump those up a little bit. Budget was always a critical thing, and always is on any project. This one was a competition based on dollars, so we really had to nail that one down too. And then the community connectivity. One of the things that was really great about the city was leading up to the selection, they had a very robust community engagement process. And so Catherine Keogh-Jers from the city helped organize those and facilitate those. And then once we were hired, part of our proposal had a community engagement process with it to continue that process. And the city actually asked for that. That was one of the requirements. Tell us how you're going to engage the community. So we thought that was pretty cool. And so as Sean mentioned, we did have LEED Gold, LEED Platinum betterments. We also had an expanded community engagement process with public art. And then we also, there was an existing outbuilding that originally they said to demolish, and we said, well, we can reuse that as part of the program. And so they ended up accepting all the betterments.
What software did you use for your design and models?
That one was Ecotect. So here's a list of the sustainability considerations that we started with. We didn't use all of these, but we really wanted to make sure that we were selecting the right tactic for this particular job. Most of these we ended up using. The one that stands out is the fourth from the list, the rainwater harvesting. So in the city of Cincinnati, it used to be illegal to capture rainwater and bring it back into the building to use for toilet conveyance. Immersion Design was actually hired to facilitate correcting that. So Immersion Design staff met with Waterworks, Metropolitan Sewer District, Health Department, basically anybody and everybody that had their fingers on this particular issue. And through several months of a lot of meetings, a lot of understanding, we were able to change the code. So we thought, how cool would it be? Because it happened just a few months before this came out. How cool would it be for this to be the first one? So we looked at storing water on site and bringing it back in for toilet conveyance, and the numbers were pretty significant, and water's pretty cheap in Cincinnati. So we didn't really see that return on investment, and we wanted to save those dollars for more of the net zero energy tactic, that kind of thing. So the wind power in our area is not very robust. The solar is much better. We also looked at solar thermal, but as we used geo wells, the proposition became a little bit less. The geo exchange is coupled with our water heater, and we also wanted to save roof space for electric generation. So I think those are the only tactic that we didn't use that's listed up here. Everything else we used. And then part of the program was actually to have a community room, which we thought was pretty cool. So the police department is inviting the neighborhood to come in and use a portion of it to help with that police-citizen relationship.
Did you end up, we have a similar stuff on some of our projects with the rainwater harvest? You had mentioned bringing it back in the building for flushing. Did you not use it for that, and did you also not use it for irrigation? Or did you do clear irrigation, or did you just use natural rainfall? Or?
Yes, it's natural rainfall. There's no irrigation. And so you mentioned what software, so this is Ecotect. So Sean went through and we had a few different scenarios that we were trying to understand what is the most energy efficient way to go. Obviously, this is where energy savings is free. It's the same building, it's the same program, same square footage, just how you stack it and orient it. One of the really interesting problems to solve for this project is that the police department wanted everything on one floor. Well, that didn't really fit with the Cincinnati plan of trying to enhance the neighborhood business district and trying to get multiple stories. So our competitors saw that as two things that could not be resolved. We thought, well, maybe there's a way to go here. And so we had more conversations with the police department, with the city, and we understood that the police department wanted all of their functions to be on one floor. But things like the locker rooms and the workout rooms, they didn't care. And so we elevated that to a second floor, pushed that out to the front. So now there's a second floor, second story component that meets the street, helps with that walkability kind of feel to it, and more of a dense urban environment, but still satisfies the police department. So it's kind of a win for everybody on two things that seemed like they were going to butt heads. And actually by doing that helps save energy, and so all these things are coming together as a really sweet spot. So the lower right ends up being the model that we use to pursue further with our design. And
The street frontage on the,
Streets to the,
just the two-story section?
yeah, street frontage would be to the left of all of these models, kind of in front of the model.
Right, so the street is here. We recognize that this was a one-story, we ended up elevating it in terms of massing, and that's where we put the community room. So it still has that frontage, that feel to it. And Jamie Curso is one of the project managers for the city, and with Joel Koopman. And Jamie mentioned that nobody else had this in their proposal. And she thought, well, if they're going to this, to this level of detail now, it's going to pay for, their knowledge is going to help us have a better performing building. And so now she's really looking for this in future proposals. Hopefully she doesn't tell everybody, but,
Right.
and hopefully people in Cincinnati don't hear this broadcast. And so then obviously looking at, right. So obviously the thermal envelope was a big part of our strategy. So this was a precast panel, 4 inches of concrete, 4 inches of expanded polystyrene, and then the finish was a combination of concrete, excuse me, concrete and brick inlay. So that was one panel. So it arrived on the site. It went up very quickly. I think that it was something like 16 days, was able to clad the building. Then we had a little gap and then put 2.5-inch metal studs in front. So that gap was important so there wasn't a thermal bridge, and spray foamed behind it and through that cavity. So then we have a continuous air barrier, really sound, really tight thermal envelope. Of course, all these other building envelope considerations, we scrutinized everything. And what was really interesting for us was the requirement for bullet resistance. So obviously the concrete panel satisfied that. The windows needed to be bullet resistant as well. So we had the bullet resistant glazing, but then we also had an offset for an insulated unit. And so when I was there on the site in February, there was snowfall that kind of landed on the window, and that never melted. It's like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Not just bulletproof, it's heat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What was the U value on bulletproof glazing?
I figured somebody's going to ask that. I don't have that committed to memory. I'm sorry, but I need to remember that.
We were touring a school in Mississippi at Greenville. They did these tours, and it's called FEMA 360 is the standard for disaster, withstanding disasters. And the glass had to withstand a oil barrel full of concrete flying at 100 miles per hour. It was
All the windows.
yeah, glass. I was like, wow. And, I also didn't remember what the
I think the U value of the solid material would be probably negligible. It's the air gap between where you have insulation. So if it's a single pane of glass and then you have your insulated unit, you couple it with the whole system. Right. No, the glass itself is probably.
okay, yeah, thick glass doesn't really matter.
Well, I wonder if you, instead of needing to have one really thick piece, if there was some system in place where you could have multiple panes, triple, quadruple of those, what it might have been to get both the thermal insulation and the bulletproof. Went through the first pane, but got stopped by the second with that quality.
Oh, I see. I don't know, but that system would have had to have been tested and approved. So we went the safe route and said, well, this thing's already been, been approved.
Well,
And
that's essentially what this is too, right? I mean, the bullet resistance is just a series of laminations, right, in the glass, right? And then there's the thermal unit. I mean, I see it.
It's not like a variation between those laminations, or is it just line down, line out, line out?
I mean, the bullet resistant layer is just a laminated. Yeah.
Solid piece. Yeah. The glass with that.
Yeah.
Like sandwich.
Yeah.
get that done.
How many windows were like that, all in the whole building?
The windows that were within the secured police zone. So the community room that I mentioned, that's not that way. That doesn't have the bullet resistant criteria applied to it. But then once you get into the secured, which is most of the building, it's
Was that built in the field, or was it assembled and installed piece?
Normal blade
it's,
unit.
yeah, it's off the shelf kind of stuff. You know,
So
built.
it was assembled in the field then, like?
Yes.
Glazed in the-
Right.
yeah.
And then lastly on this list is the building pressure testing, and we'll get on that here a little bit later. But we wanted to have a blower door test just to, make sure that everything was everything that we thought was going to be there was there and built the proper way. So in terms of the actual project, this was the site rendering that we submitted. Again, it's at the top of a watershed, so the bioretention cells were pretty critical for us. As Sean mentioned, we were involved with another landscape firm, Human Nature, to do the whole watershed master plan. This being up at the top was the first opportunity for us to be able to tie something into the bottom. So that was pretty nice for us. And you can see the streets on the left, and we pushed the building up to the street, more walkable environment. We have a little plaza out in front, and then put a lot of the parking to the rear and to the side. The existing. You're asking all these really difficult questions. I used to know, but I don't. Yeah, the issue with the police station is that they have their cruisers and they have their personal vehicles. So it's so it is. If this were just an office building, we could get by with less. But you essentially, not everybody, but most people have two cars.
Yeah, that was the kicker.
It was.
It's like this amazing project that has this still has a giant sea of parking. Right?
Right. Yeah. So what we did was with the
Zip police car.
Zip police.
yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
The one thing that we did do was keep the existing outbuilding in the back. It acts as a garage, but it's undercover, so at least we have lower heat island effect, that way, and we're using existing resources and embodied energy, all that kind of stuff.
So you was a building that wasn't a garage.
Well, it's like an existing just
It was-
block shed.
Yeah, it was the site used to be a car dealer and repair shop. So this was actually their repair shop. So it was already, it was built for cars. So why not keep it and use it for cars? So then this is the final design. There were a couple other garage components for maintenance, and then also for building or for a crime investigation. So if there's a vehicle that's involved in a crime, they bring it in, they isolate it, and then they can do their CSI tricks with it, to find all the fibers and hairs and all that kind of stuff.
Can you run through that color code there?
Sure. So the bottom right, the sort of bluish gray, that's the garage aspect. And again, one of the challenges for that is that throughout the whole year, whether it's in the dead of winter or the heat of the summer, those garage doors are going to open. And so how do you compensate for that? So we actually have, between the blue and the rest of the colors, we actually have that heavily insulated. And then we have radiant heat on the floor of the garages. So it brings the temperature up pretty quickly. It heats the person, so the person feels warmer. And if you think about being a mechanic, a lot of times you're on the ground anyway. And so it heats the body, so it does a really nice job mitigating it. We have different police department functions. So the sort of command central, the captain and his team is in the upper left, which is that orange color. Then we have the investigations in the light gray. The brown is more building services. Mechanical rooms, we have some mechanical rooms open to the outside, so people that are servicing, they don't have to come through the police station, they can service at any time from the outside. The green are more officer functions, open work areas, patrol. They have the roll call, which is the larger room in the green, and they actually draw their weapons for as part of their routine. So the wall that they face needed to be bullet resistant as well. So just in case somebody actually shoots through, it'll not go through the wall. And then the red area, that's more of the public zone. So anything that is not red is within that bullet resistant secured area. So even going into you can get into the first vestibule, then you have to be buzzed in to get to the public sector, then you have to be buzzed in or escorted into the rest of the building. So there's a series of security protocol. And then, as I mentioned, we moved the locker rooms and the workout center and some of the mechanical upstairs. And what this allowed us to do was basically help with the thermal properties of the offices below, because there's not a roof there. There's an actual tempered building, and we could let the locker rooms float a little bit in terms of temperature. So you don't have to have those tempered the way that you have to have the offices down below. So then this is the final elevations that we had, and that front piece there with the angled roof, that's the community center. You can see a lot of glass there. We were able to do that because it didn't have the bullet resistant capabilities to it. Otherwise, that would have been pretty pricey.
So that's a taller, it's a single floor or first floor, but it's a taller.
Larger volume, yes. So that it could be close to the second floor that you see next to it. Those thin windows up on top is the locker room area. And then down below is the command office space.
How far out is that overhang on?
Boy, what's with all these questions? I don't know. I'd say it's maybe 8 feet, maybe, something like that. You can see in the bottom elevation, there's a long, thin, clear story window that we have that rises above that first floor bar. We have an atrium down the middle. It's more of a story and a half, and then the second floor. And so you can kind of see that here in the top section. Just to get some daylight into this building, there's a central spine, that atrium, that helps with communication between the departments, but also creates this sort of more circulation, casual kind of zone through it. And then the bottom is that community space. Again, just bring a lot of light into that so we can lower the electric consumption.
Can you use that central spine for any kind of natural ventilation?
We do not have natural ventilation. So trying to have operable windows within the secure, we weren't able to figure that one out. So, and then also when we're looking at trying to create a really tight envelope, that was the strategy that we used as opposed to the natural ventilation piece. And so then these were the renderings that we submitted, and it pretty much looks like this today. So we're also looking at the different technology pieces, making sure we had the design chops there. I mentioned the radiant heat flooring. That's what this shows with the garage. We had dedicated outdoor air systems, geo-exchange heat pumps, zoning, and so the building is zoned in such a way that the water source heat pumps didn't have to travel far from where they were to temper the spaces. And then also they were, one of the really cool features is that they're really easy to maintain. So they're in a closet, they're not up in the ceiling. Not only are they in a closet, but they're elevated, so you don't have to bend down to work on them. You can, kind of be right there and work on them. And so the more that you can make it easier on the maintenance crew, the more they're going to be maintained, right?
I'm less afraid they are. Oh, you want to put how many units in this building?
Yeah,
Yeah, dedicated outdoor unit has energy recovery on it.
it does.
Is there any exhaust in this building that you wouldn't be able to tap the energy from? So like kitchens or?
There's a break room, but it's not a kitchen. And then, yes, the garage is evac out. But, so, I mean, these are some of the electrical components that we're looking at. And like I said, we were really, the city allowed us to work with the plug loads with the stipulation that we can't mess with how police function. So looking at the right vending machine to install, that kind of stuff. This was the eQuest model that we did after design, just to say, okay, are we on track with our EEY? And we had multiple energy charrettes, some with just the design team and some with the city and end user. So as I mentioned, we had at times 5 or 6 police officers in the room, talking about these kind of scenarios, which is really great because you don't get that opportunity all the time. And so early on, some of our design thoughts were just with the team in terms of how we lay out the spaces to make them more energy efficient. This being a 24/7, it wasn't quite as much of a challenge as it might be in other situations, because it is fully operational. And then working through that eQuest model, we wanted to benchmark ourselves back to say, where do we stand against CBECs? Where do we stand against current codes, more recent buildings? So the CBECs broken out into the different categories comes to a total of almost 116. The code compliant modern day police stations come around 80, and our energy was design was coming in at 35. So we've met with, we've identified a liaison with the city that's going to start giving us some energy performance criteria. So the building is measured, it's metered in different ways, and then we can begin to track to say, is the building performing the way that we thought it would? So we don't end up a year from now saying, oh, we're not there. Within 3 months, hopefully we can see any adjustments that need to be made.
And so to what level are you then still on the contract, monitoring the building? Is there any kind of performance criteria that you're responsible for?
Under contract, no, but we do that. So, we're just hoping that they don't say no.
Right.
I mean, it's
Well,
like,
can they say, no, you can't?
can we give it? Can you give us some?
Project, is that give you better access to
Um,
them not having?
I think
there's a lot of friendlies there,
there's
so
just
it's not going to be.
achieving
Right.
the target.
Yeah, I don't see that being an issue, but sometimes with public agencies, because it is a public agency and we have the rights to that information, then there's a legal process that we have to go through to ask for the information. And so a lot of times that kind of bogs down, whereas if you're, good friends with your client, just, hey, can you just hand us this up? Sure.
So I assume there's commissioning on this building. Is there any kind of ongoing commissioning? 5 years?
There's not, that's under contract. But as Sean mentioned, the city is really interested in understanding the performance of this building. We do have an educational monitor in the lobby, so it is tied to the performance. So somebody needs to be feeding that information into it. It also talks about our water saving strategies and transportation and that kind of stuff.
Before you change the slide, do you actually have meters on each of those subcategories?
We do, yeah.
Do you have more than that, or would you recommend more than that, or those things like the ones that capture?
We feel like this gets us where we need to be. There's always that that decision to be made. Do you meter, how far down do you divide everything? And I don't know, if you do it in big chunks, you can.
The only challenge, or the only place where it might be worth investing more would be within the plug load area, right? Because that's really most likely going to be the area where you see pretty wild fluctuation, right? Where your potential to see something that you didn't predict. Right.
But if
the HVAC is off, then we can. It's
so within the
easier
for the building to control.
Exactly, it's an easier way to diagnose what's going on, right? It's like, oh, but we designed it this way. This is the equipment. Let's make sure it was installed properly. Let's get the commissioning agent out there. If it shows up in the plug loads where suddenly it's far off, then it's like you kind of have to do a little bit more investigation.
Yeah, but usually it's walking around saying, "Hey, you got a personal space heater down there." Yeah. So what's or look at all these radios that people have, or look at So
I think that's true for building high plug loads, right? Like if your plug loads are like here, one of the highest loads you're building, then it makes sense. If your plug loads are more down like 3.6, whatever.
Well,
That might be the way you want.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we found. Hey. That's right. What?
You got this is the.
Yeah, just good stuff.
Good stuff.
They start school at 9, 10 after 9. But we have to be at work an hour early.
So
The bosses start school an hour after.
So you took her on your bike?
Yeah, so you can't show up to work again. That's how you get to work today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Did she have a helmet as well? Yeah. Did she have a helmet as well? You said you took her to school?
Oh, no, that's even worse. I have to drive her and then go home and get my scooter and then work.
Well, thanks for joining us anyway. So we're talking about metering and the police station. We wanted to be able to measure where we stood in terms of our design. So we modeled that. Our benchmarks were the CBEX information and the recent code compliance, and then where our design hit.
Probably gotta wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah, it's getting close. So obviously cost is an issue. This was a competitively bid project. So the base building, this is what the city had as their requirements without the site work. So this is just the building, came in at 9.8 million. And when you look at the means cost guide in terms of a police station in our area, that was 10.4 million. So we felt pretty comfortable going into the competition that we were providing value to the client. With the net zero energy high performance features, that came in at 1.9. And so as Sean mentioned, one of the strategies that we tried to employ was to look at PACE financing to cover not just the 1.9, but also some of the 9.8, so that through PACE financing, even our net zero energy design would be less than our base bid price. Then when you break it down into cost per square foot, our design for the base bid was 251, with the high performance that came in at 300 per square foot, and the means just as the base code compliant was at 268. So again, we felt pretty good with our base, and if they wanted to go net zero energy, we still felt like that was reasonable in terms of the ask. And we did a return on investment, and the solar panels are paid off within the 8-year time frame. So we felt anything under 10 is fair game, especially when you can make the case that after 8 years, now you have free energy. That's got to feel pretty good to taxpayers, right? So these are just some shots. I wanted to include one of the panels. This is one of the panels going in the lower left. And as I said, it went up really, really quickly. You can kind of see an aerial shot here of the solar panels. One of the things that we really wanted to do as a design team was to get all the panels up on the roof. And you can see on the back garage and on the main building, there are some larger strips there that are void of panels. The city wanted to pull some of those panels off the roof for a canopy so that the citizens could actually see the solar panels. Otherwise, it's up on the roof and you can't see them. So that was more of a public display. Obviously, it helps some of the officers too because they get to park under the shade. It's just kind of a badge of honor to be able to put everything up on the roof, and then they kind of took that away from us. So,
You could fit that entire canopy up on the roof.
Up on the roof. This is the final product. Again, that larger glassy piece is the community center. We do have some of these columns out in front. Each neighborhood, there are 14, get a column. That but they also act as a security device. So somebody trying to drive up, and attack the building will hit those columns prior to. You can see some of the landscape, which are the bioretention cells, and then the garage piece. We also, part of this was CPTED, so crime prevention through environmental design. So recognizing that there are visual cues that the architecture and landscape can provide to minimize crime. So we used a lot of those techniques, having a lot of glass, so it's really visual. People outside feel like they can be watched. Having low landscape, so nobody can kind of hide in there or plant bombs or anything. Have clear division between what's public and what's private, so that it's not just a chain link fence. It's a secured structure. So even visually, the police won't feel like they're being spied upon. And then creating a little plaza secure plaza for the police. You can see on the right-hand side, that's a 72-hour generator in case something fails. They have 72 hours of power, but they'll actually have more because the solar panels will extend that.
And just, we were talking earlier about the cost of the PV, right? I mean, a backup generator is part of the basic requirements of the project anyway, right? So when you start to drive the DUI down, then your cost is not just your cost of your PVs, but the cost of your backup generator, right? So
Is there better backup on that so they can actually run down?
the generator.
It's
Is the PV have any batteries associated, or is PV not functional?
the PVs do not have battery, so it would be a direct draw, but then any excess then gets put back to the grid.
So is there assume there's a specific size requirement for the generator? Were you able to include the solar panels in that size requirement, just reducing the cost of the generator?
No, they said it's got to be a 72-hour. We said, but we can. No. It's got to be.
They're feeding from the brain.
Is Cincinnati get weather patterns similar to New England, or do they get more sun, do we get more clouds and bad weather than New England?
We're actually in the
Pretty much
same.
identical solar resources.
We had a map earlier that sort of outlined that Cincinnati and Boston are right in line. So you can see some of the other kind of attributes there. Make sure we're meeting the street. These, as I mentioned, these are part of the art program. So each community were invited to tell their story on their own particular neighborhood column. And they chose these graphics, key icons of their community to put onto the glass. And then also some of the landscape features. We also created this really pretty cool map out of Corian. So this is all of District 3. And these individual colored dots, again, represent key spaces in their community. So as you're giving directions, you can say, oh, go to the fire station, or go to this park, or go to this church, and people will know where they need to go. Big part of this is visibility. So from the command center, you can look out and you can see all what's going on. You can see people approaching. There are moments where you can see all the way through the building. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Pretty interesting.
So we're almost finished here. But not just to get daylight and views, but then also for security reasons. You can see if anybody's walking outside. This is that atrium space. We have a clear story where daylight can come through, which helps mitigate some of the electric light during the day. But of course, this is 24/7, so we weren't able to remove light fixtures. That cost savings because you still needed them, but it helps with some of the energy consumption. And then on the back end, we did the blower door test and some thermal imagery study. We specified. So we specified a 0.15 CFM per square foot at 50 pascals. The actual measured was at 0.09. So extremely tight building. We have the contractor was telling us that a sub was coming off the roof, slammed the roof hatch, and the door on the first floor popped open. There's nowhere for the air to go. And then just, again, some of the other features, some of the other cool stories, the general obviously would send any of the invoices to the controller, to his controller. The controller called back in February and said, I don't think I have all of your invoices. I said, well, what do you think's missing? And they said the temporary heat. I said, no, I sent that out to you. So do you have number one, this number, this number? Yep. Okay, well, you got it all. He says, well, we're not using what we thought we were going to use. They saved $4,000 a week on temporary heating because the building was so sound. That's just dollars that went into the contractor's pocket. Now that we know, we can say, okay, well, maybe we can
back some of that out.
And lower the price. It was the like those torpedoes. There's torpedo heaters that they have. So
they didn't
during construction,
they didn't have to use them at all.
they used them. They brought it up to about 55 degrees, but then it shuts off because it's not needed. So there's another story where he woke up in the morning and looked at his phone, and there was a text that was tied to the system that said that the power from the building was shut off at 11 o'clock the night before. So he's thinking, great, I'm going to come in. It's going to be freezing. This was in February for us. It was below freezing, and they had just mudded the day before. So he's thinking, okay, all that's cracked. He comes in and it's 50 degrees.
You know what? This was polar vortex year, wasn't it? Like record cold.
Yeah, it was record cold for us in February, and
I hadn't even thought about that.
55 degrees, at 11 o'clock, and then when he got to the job site at 7, it's still 50 degrees.
Let me ask you something. There's two scenarios. One was a girl, her father had a earth shelter home where all the window space is south, I guess. And another client of mine did a renovation. They're right here by the garden, and all the window space is the river. Both those people told me that in the winter they never have to use their heat. It's hot. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what I didn't ask them is in the summertime they must be sweltering, right? So their AC bill goes up. Is it better to have not use any heat, or maybe oriented so you use a little bit so that in the summertime it's not so hot?
Well, with a house you can use natural ventilation. So that sounds very similar to some buildings that I did out in New Mexico. They were earth burned, solar glazing on the south, and even sometimes during the winter months, you would have to open up a low window and a skylight to get some natural ventilation.
She was in Minnesota. She said that they were sweating. In the wintertime.
And I will say that in New Mexico, before I went out there, my mind went to, well, of course you're in the desert. But this was up in Taos, up in the mountains. It had the 8th best ski resorts in the country. So, a lot of snow gets dumped there. But yeah, if you have a really sound envelope, the sun's energy can heat that space, and you can be fine.
The sun is so high in the sky, they get that penetration if you just have that south glazing. It's low on the horizon in the winter, you're getting it right in the windows there. But if there's any sort of overhang, the angle changes, and you're not getting any direct radiation to the building because there's too much shade. If it's designed like it's just a glass with no shading, you're going to get into your way problem. So they probably heat like that.
So it's still good to try to get this close to south facing as you can.
If you can maximize your passive strategies, that's really the way to go. Your first.
Minimize the saying if you southern sunlight is predictable, right? So you can design an overhang that will shade it during the summer, but let sun in the winter, so you don't have the overheating problem.
And I think in this climate, it's still better. I think your question is sort of, is it better to design passive towards heat gain in the winter or heat protection in the summer? The cost in most buildings around here is heating. So you want to design to maximize winter heat gain rather than not worrying about the AC in summer. It's all the 3 weeks anyway.
So in Texas, you don't want anything to face itself other than, a little bit.
And depends, you know, mountains are different, there's floor, there's a lot of different ways to
Remember those diagrams
Yeah.
from the late seventies?
Usually a lot of a really well-designed envelope will cure a lot of ills. So even if you have to use mechanical systems to temper it, you use it very little. One of the commissioning agents on here made a really great statement that you shouldn't rely on mechanical systems to make up for a bad envelope. You know, so focus on the envelope first, and then you can size your equipment properly. And a lot of times you can downsize and put that money towards the envelope.
In your building, what are the, say, the three big things that help you achieve net zero? Is it the envelope and the renewable energy?
Well, certainly we needed the renewable energy to get to net zero, but the way that made that affordable was the thermal envelope was probably the big one. Being able to look at plug loads, having a client that allowed us to mess with that stuff when normally architects don't get the chance to do that. And then also the client being open to us making different kinds of strategies and suggestions. We do have 40 geo wells, so that helps a lot. And then, you know, just having a client willing to allow us to ask a lot of questions.
Is the daylighting help a lot, or was that just extra?
The challenge with this project is that it's a police station that's 24/7. So daylighting does help during the day. We do have sensors, but at nights it's all on anyway. We do have, you know, so
We did do some zoning. I mean, zoning, I think, would be the other key strategy that played into it. So looking at taking program functions that are infrequently used or not regularly used and isolating those and even creating those as buffer zones for the spaces that are occupied 24/7. So, you know, the community rooms serve as a buffer, the locker rooms serve as a buffer, the garages serve as a buffer. So a lot of the occupied spaces that are 24/7 that need constant cooling, constant heating or whatever, have more spaces around them that serve as a buffer. So
Did they allow you to put the occupancy sensors in all those rooms that you're talking about?
How many more police stations are you gonna do in Cincinnati?
well, we hope all of them. They're talking now about doing District 5, so this was District 3.
Into a fire station, those guys are in 24/7.
Right.
Taking showers,
Yeah.
doing stuff, watching TV, cooking.
What was the number on, since you have the energy's intensity on the average of these types of buildings? Did that translate into like a number that the mayor could say this police station is using this much less power every year, or this much less cost?
Well, we submitted our proposal and it had the net zero energy betterments. We hadn't heard yet if those betterments were accepted. And then the mayor at the time had a press conference and he said, we're going to have the first net zero energy police station in the country. And we looked at each other and said, well, there you go. But I think a lot of people are waiting for the measured results to really be able to thump your chest over that
We
one.
spent $1 million or $2
Yeah.
on the upgrades.
Yeah, 1.9. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but we do have
we have
to
another meeting.
wrap
that we
things
have
up.
to go.
I have a question. I missed the distribution for heating and cooling. Did you guys, what did you use for that?
Distribution.
Yeah, like I saw the radiant in the garage, but for heating and cooling, or so the building, a lot of small offices, like how did you, was it fire, was it propane, was it?
No, it's just heat pumps. For each zone.
Yeah. So
Nail it to, like what were the units in the offices that were actually heating?
The unit in the unit.
In the offices?
Oh, in the offices.
Yeah.
Well, it was just,
we have water source heat pumps in zones.
right, so for each two offices or whatever, there'd be one heat pump.
What's the vent or the ridge? What's the
Air. The air is coming from dedicated outside air. So there's a one outside air unit that drives, marginally conditioned air into the space. And then the heat pumps serve each zone and temper the air. So the ventilation air is coming in from the outside air unit.
So because the building's so tight, the heat pumps work, because normally heat pumps stop working around 30, right? Maybe 60 buildings, tight, they'll keep working all day long.
Oh, yeah.
And they're internal, they're not.
Is that answering your question?
Yeah, I kind of, it's more like the actual, I think it's probably either an employee unit or a virtual beam is in there. So heat pumps moving the heat around, but like how is it changing?
Oh, the exchange to the, yeah, it's not a chill beam, I don't think. So it would be, air. Air filter. Yeah.
So thank you.